Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I am very excited to share this episode, and I had to add a little intro with you because earlier this week I joined as a guest on a brand new Cavs podcast hosted by Zach NBA. I thought our conversation went really great, and so if you enjoyed this episode, then I'd highly recommend you keep up with Zach's work on his new channel because his first few episodes were really good so far, and I'm sure he's going to deliver on some fantastic Cavs content throughout the season, so you don't want to miss it. And one last note before we get to this, we actually recorded this episode earlier this week before the Cavs and Thunder played, so we don't focus on anything specific from that game, but I think our conversation actually applies perfectly to the performance we saw from Evan Mobley, because we spent the whole episode talking about all of the improvements Mobley has made to his game, everything from the increase in confidence to the way he drives to the basket. And if you still want a breakdown of the Cavs Thunder game all on its own, then definitely stay tuned to this channel. But without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this conversation we had, and let's get into the episode.
Okay, so here with Tony Pesta from literally all the things. Like all of them. I don't know of any Cavs thing that you don't do. Stop me when I get to the end of the list, at least of that I am aware of. So we write for Fear the Sword. We do YouTube breakdowns of film and just other topics on YouTube that you do on the Cavs. We have the Junkyard podcast, which is a video podcast on both YouTube and on the Write Down Euclid podcast feed. Are you in the team facilities? Are you helping with the team managers? Are you getting jerseys ready? Like, what are you not doing?
Not yet, but if they need a ball boy or anything, I could help. Anything that gets Evan Mobley to the All-Star game, I'm ready to do it. I started TikTok. I've only uploaded one video, but I guess you could add that to the list. Maybe I'll get more consistent there as well. But yeah, man, I'm doing my best to push this Cavs propaganda, and I'm really excited to be on this brand new podcast. I know we already talked about this a little bit, and I think you even mentioned it on your first episode, but it's pretty awesome how many great content creators we have covering the Cavs in just all different types of ways with different styles. I'm not going to shout out anyone individually because I feel like there's so many, and I'm bound to forget someone, but whether it's the podcasters, the bloggers, the various, accounts we have on Twitter, just everyone across the board, the Cavs community is killing it. And I'm glad we have another Cavs podcast joining the fight here. So I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to be in and welcomed at least by you, which I feel like all of the things I just mentioned makes you the official gatekeeper. So I'm gonna take that as my official permission to be in this space. I'm actually
I
gonna hang it.
appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm,
I don't know if I don't know if I'll claim that title of the gatekeeper, but that's very nice to say.
I think we should make it up. I think we should put a notarized document together. You can hang it on your wall,
Tony
and
Pasta. No, everyone's welcome in the Cavs space. If there's anyone listening who wants to cover the Cavs in any way, I say do it. Just go for it. We could always have more voices here.
for sure. So you mentioned pushing the Evan Mobley All-Star uh, propaganda to start. So let's start there because I brought this up on Monday's pod this week as a bit of a theory or potentially a hopeful situation where I posed that I thought that it could be Evan Mobley having a moment. And it all happened within the same like 24-hour period. He wins Defensive Player of the Month, which nobody knew was an award until Evan Mobley won it. But I don't care. It's an official award, and we're going to add it to his propaganda. He goes on ESPN. He shows up as barely cracking the top 10 for the front court on the eastern side of fan voting for the All-Star ballots. And then he follows that up and just has this massive performance against the Mavericks. He had 34 points, 10 rebounds, 3 of 6 from 3, the best plus minus on the team, which I don't know if you remember looking at that box score. I've got it in front of me, was plus 32.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely insane. But it all culminated in the same 24-hour period. And I'm wondering if getting that exposure on the national level and then going out and kind of just blistering on the court is enough to help like catapult him and his image in the casual basketball fan's mind. Where do you think do you think that's, great timing, or is that just way too old school of me and nobody's watching ESPN anymore?
No, I think you make a really good point because I think if we're trying to break down, this has been a question that Cavs fans have asked really forever when it just comes to being a small market team. But especially this year, we're hearing the discussion again of like, why isn't Evan Mobley getting the all-star love that we feel he deserves? I think it comes down to two things, really. They kind of go hand in hand. One, it's the general lack of media coverage, right? Like he's just not on ESPN very often. So when he does make an appearance, it's a moment for him. But some of that, as much as it's small market bias, anti small market stuff, some of it is Mobley's game itself. Defense doesn't always sell the same way that having like a crazy offensive bag does. And, Mobley's having a very special year on offense, but he doesn't pop off the screen like Wemby or Jokic. And so I do think in general, it's harder for him to get attention from non Cavs fans, especially on social media. You can look at the fan votes and LaMelo Ball is just leading the way. And, Mobley, he just doesn't have the highlights to drive engagement like LaMelo. So I kind of understand. And it doesn't help that the counting stats aren't anything that are too impressive or crazy. I know Tim Bontemps kind of stirred up Cavs Twitter once again by pointing out that Mobley's I'm saying only averaging 18 and 8. The reality is, just to play some defense and combat that narrative real quick, Mobley's playing a career low 30.2 minutes per game. And so we'll talk more about his stats and all that, but he's averaging a ton of career highs. And so when you factor in that he's doing that on a career low in minutes, he's just playing at such a high level on both ends of the floor. He's still the third option on this team. So when you look at like, the counting numbers or anything like that, it just doesn't really reflect the impact that he's had on winning, the fact that he doesn't even need to play in the fourth quarter more often than not. So to kind of answer your question and talk about the all-star stuff in general, for me, Evan Mobley is a clear lock for the All-Star game. I do think you said he's having a moment. It feels like every other week he's having a new moment. Like, just a couple weeks ago, he had the 41 against Charlotte, winning defensive player of the month, turning up against Dallas. Like he's just doing a little bit of everything. And it feels like he's getting better as the year goes on. So while he doesn't necessarily have the social media pool to get, number one in fan votes or anything like that, I do think because the NBA coaches are the ones who decide the reserves for the All-Star game, I don't think they'll overlook the impact that Mobley has had as a defender and now as an offensive threat as well. So I feel very confident that he's going to be an All-Star, but I do understand why he's not setting the fan votes ablaze. But in due time, with the way he's playing, I think people are going to start recognizing what he's doing, especially if he keeps, playing the way he has been.
I completely agree with that, and I don't think that it hurts that at this same time, like I said, that he's having a little bit of a moment in backing that up so far. This is releasing on Thursday. We're recording it on Tuesday, so Oklahoma City has not happened yet. So we don't know what or may not have taken place, aside from the fact that that was flexed into a national TV slot. They also have two more national TV games next week. So people are, it just feels like people are getting exposed to him on a national level kind of at the right time because he's also on this tear of playing out of his mind. And the confidence is just rising and increasing for him as the year goes. And it feels like it could be coming to a head. And maybe that's just me being the optimist that people will start to take notice because of all of these things, and they ultimately actually won't because people suck and they like to take away the things that we love. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I'm going with. And so I guess to level set our discussion today, if you couldn't tell from the way that we opened on that, today is all about Evan Mobley and the leap that he is having because I would say he hasn't he's hopped, he's skipped, he's jumped, he's leapt. The leap happened, right? Like it's behind us. It's what how did we get here? What does that leap look like? And kind of where could he possibly be going next? So I thought we'd kind of go through just a I think this is going to be a very nerdy podcast. I think we're going to have a lot of data, to sift through and talk about and to back some of these things, but then just kind of contextualizing it and putting our ball knower hat on and like visually on the court, what do we see that is just starkly different from what he has been in the past, and kind of how has he actually been unlocked? So that's ultimately where we're going today. You started with some of the counting stats. I've got a slew of them to run through here, and these are just the per games on an improvement from last year basis for, call it a handful. Field goals made up from 6.4 to 7.3, attempted from 11 to 12.7, and a lot of that is coming from the three-point line. 3 points, three-pointers made from 0.4 to 1.2, and three-pointers attempted 1.2 to 2.8. I'm going to stop there for a second. He's making as many threes as he was taking per game last year. And I think it's noticeable. Like, can you feel it in that there's a lack of hesitation and a significant increase in his just like his pull, right? Like I don't notice the hesitation that I used to and the indecisiveness at the 3-point line. What say you?
No, I mean, I agree completely. I think if we were just talking what's the single biggest thing that has caused this leap from Evan Mobley, I think it is the increase in confidence. And I'll save some of my thoughts on that just to focus on the 3-point shooting for now and keep us focused. But you mentioned it. He's basically doubling his 3-point attempts while still shooting 42% on them. And most importantly, he's taking them with confidence and he's taking them from anywhere on the floor. So last season, I'll pull up some of these counting stats, some of these nerd numbers. 42% of Mobley's 3-point attempts last season came from inside the corner. So it was kind of that desperation move that we see from teams where it's like, oh, we'll just stick the bad shooter in the corner and hope that that's good enough to hide him. And, hopefully no one notices he's there. But if they do, I guess he'll just be taking a corner three. This season, only 25% of Mobley's 3-point attempts are from the corner. So that's down from 42% all the way to 25%. He's being used in a more versatile way, and that has opened the entire floor for him. And most importantly, he's not just jacking them up there from anywhere, he's actually making them too. So now he's forcing defenders to close out to him from above the break. And that's important because when he's able to take defenders off the dribble and attack a closeout, when he's getting to the middle of the floor, driving from the top of the key, that's a lot different than driving from the baseline. Now you have more options, whether it's to kick it to either corner, the elbows. You can attack with either hand, which we've seen Mobley is amazing at getting to the rim, finishing with the left or the right. So that 3-point shooting, the leap is legit. It's not perfect yet, right? Like I think the ultimate goal is I would like to see him get that volume up to 4 or maybe even 5 attempts per game. Right now he's at about 3 per game. But this is a massive step in the right direction. And we've seen him trending this way for a little while. If you just look at his free throw shooting in his first 2 years, he shot about 66% combined from the free throw line in his first 2 seasons. He managed to improve that to 71% last year. And now he's at 78% this year. So that's a real shooting leap right there. And we've seen him progress each season. So it's not like some random fluke where out of nowhere he's shooting so much better. We've seen him on this trajectory for a while. So I don't think it's a shock that he's shooting at a career high rate right now. And yeah, I mean, it's the one thing that everyone is focused on for so long is, can Evan Mobley space the floor? Right now, is he, Dirk Nowitzki or Karl Anthony Towns? No, but he's clearly made a big step in the right direction, and that's all you could ask for a 23-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I didn't pull a bunch of the per 36s because you did mention that he is playing 30.2 minutes a game, which is
Mm.
a career low, but he also only played 30.6 last year. So, like, I don't feel like when I look at Evan Mobley, I need to look at the per 36 to see how he's growing. I think to your point though about his volume would be higher if he was playing more minutes and more in line with what starters around the league typically do. So I do have that over here real quick just for funsies. His per 36 3-point attempts per game would be at 3.3. So if you just kind of like you he's still not quite at that, even if you just adjust for, playing more minutes. If they would just man, if you would just stop blowing teams out and sitting your starters, so that these stats can go up. But uh there is still room for growth for him to get that volume up, which is, I think, speaks to the really the competence of the entire team, because I literally just did this breakdown and this deep dive again on Monday, where the team's volume is going up considerably over the past like 8 games. They went up from whatever it was. I think it was like 39 a game, 38, 39 a game, up to like 46 a game. And yet it's it's getting distributed amongst kind of everybody with the way that
Mm,
they share the ball. They're not just relying on one or two guys to be volume 3-point shooters. Everybody's firing, including Mobley. But it would be nice as a continued evolution and continued growth to see him, you know, shoot even more of them. But I want him to keep that confidence, and I don't want him to go away from the things that he's doing really well, like driving to the rim just for the sake of shooting more threes. Yeah, so I don't want to. I want to caveat it a little bit. I want that increased volume to be from a productive increase of volume,
mm,
and more just more reps and more opportunities increase in volume, rather than just, no, you pull the trigger more. Don't pump fake, just shoot it. Who cares if that hand is in your face? You're 7 feet tall. It doesn't matter. It's not going to affect you, but it is. You know what I mean? Like, he's not some laser that's just going to, drill threes that are super contested all the time. I don't think we're ever going to see him get to that, nor would we expect him to. But I
mm,
thought it was really astute that you brought up the drive numbers. I actually have some of that, because I was interested to see where he ranks kind of amongst his peers as well as on the team from just a drive volume, because that feels like one of the areas that is much different for him from last year. In not I didn't actually pull what his drive numbers were last year, but the effectiveness of those drives feels a lot more tangible,
mm,
because people are respecting that 3-point shot. They're biting on those pump fakes now. He's not just pump faking into a guy that's sagging off of him and like just driving to what the defender is expecting him to do, right? He's pump faking, they're biting, and he's actually got an advantage on those drives. Would you believe me if I told you that Evan Mobley is tied for fourth on the Cavs in drives per game, behind only Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Ty Jerome? He's tied with Karras at that spot.
I'm surprised Ty Jerome is that high, but I love to see it from Mobley. I love to see, we've kind of hit on this a little bit, but just the fact that if you look at the touches per game too, like last year's like Darius and Donovan completely dominating the ball.
Yep.
Now it's really spread out. I think Mobley is second, or I think he's third in touches per game, but it's like
Mhm.
last year he was 20 touches per game behind the two guards. Now he's like right behind them. And I think that's where you see the drive numbers increase. You see, the ball isn't, they're not averaging as many assists per game as last season. I don't think it's right around the same number, if anything, but the ball feels like it's moving more, and it's because other guys are able to bring up the ball and touch it more often, rather than it just being that heliocentric style with the two guards. So that's a great stat. I love to see Mobley being more aggressive on his drives, and I have stuff on that too, but I'll let you keep cooking.
Well, in that same vein, so he is third in shots on the team in shots taken and made off of drives, behind just the two guards. He's fourth on free throw attempts from drives and third in points off of drives, again behind the two guards. It's 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 noticeable to me, because this is a 7-footer that is listed as a center on NBA.com. Like, when I pulled amongst his peers, I had to pull the center position. He's not even showing up in the forward data. So when you think about just like who's driving to the rim, it's not usually your center. Right, like you expect the guards, and yet he's been incredibly effective and efficient in doing that, and they're relying on him to do that. I think, that kind of where you were going with and I know we're sort of bouncing around all over the place with how we're doing this, and I actually like it because it feels more organic, because the way that they have empowered him to just take the ball off the rim and go. I think that has such a ripple effect on everything else and creates so much more than just, his three ball does in the half court, creating space, but I think it creates so much space in transition because not only do they get to play with more pace and catch the defense a little bit more off guard because they're, going and playing faster, it's also enticing and kind of uh it's what's the word I'm looking for? It is imperative that Donovan and Darius are also moving without the ball.
Mm.
They aren't just coming you're not waiting that 2 seconds or whatever for them to come back to the ball after Mobley has gotten the rebound and he passes it to one of them. If they're sharing the floor, they're both back there waiting on it, and he picks his favorite child to give it to in that moment. The defense is already set up. Now you're walking it up the court. Like it gets them moving, it gets them going, and allows kind of everything else to pick up. It's not like they play at some like blistering pace by any stretch of the imagination. Like they were like sixth in the league in pace last time I looked at this, but I think it's the catalyst and the starting point for all of the movement of man and movement of ball that Kenny Atkinson has instilled in this ball club. I think it all kind of like stems back from just that empowerment of Mobley to just go. And I think you see it in those numbers, the way that he drives, the way that he even facilitates from driving. I've got a bunch of passing data we can get into if you really want to nerd out on it, but it, when you just focus in on the eye test and what's really different, like to me that's the biggest shift from last year to this year, and even more impactful on the entirety of the team than just his 3-point shooting. I think the 3-point shooting may be his biggest like personal development and improvement from last year and opening up his own opportunities in his own game. But I think it's that grab and go that's been the biggest impact for uplifting, the kind of the rest of the team with him.
Yeah, I mean, it just adds an entirely new layer to your offense when you have a third guy who can grab and go, like you said. And when Darius or Donovan aren't the ones bringing up the ball, now they're attacking off the ball. A lot of times, catching with an advantage rather than coming from a standstill or walking the ball up the floor. And there's only 16 seconds on the shot clock now, and we're kind of desperately trying to create something out of the pick and roll. You just have more options, and yeah, their pace is. I think it was 24th last year, so it's been a
Yeah,
really
it's way
big
down there.
leap. But as you mentioned, they're still not playing at like a helter skelter pace. To me, I think it's just they're very intentional. Like they're playing with such a purpose now where it doesn't feel like there's any wasted movement, wasted dribbles, wasted passes. It's like every time down the court, they're getting straight into an action. And as soon as they get a quality look, they're taking it. We don't see, you know, I feel like it's rare that you see them reset their action over and over again like they would last year, where you'd get like three pick and rolls in the same possession. Now there's a different guy bringing it up the floor. They know what they're getting into, and it's just as soon as we get a look, we're taking it. I know they're shooting way more often within the first like 8 seconds of the shot clock as compared to last season. So as you mentioned, a lot of that comes down to empowering players like Evan Mobley and really across the board. I think Kenny Atkinson's done a good job of just empowering all the role players. But for Mobley, the biggest thing to me and the biggest change in his game is that increasing confidence. And that goes hand in hand with the reps that Kenny Atkinson has given him. Mobley is a focal point of the offense now. He's no longer just kind of in the background hiding. Kenny has put him in a position where he's going to get the reps and he's allowed to experiment and fail at certain things. And I think that makes a big difference, especially for Mobley's confidence, because now all of a sudden Mobley can grab the rebound and bring it up the floor and run an inverted pick and roll. And even if he makes a mistake and turns it over, he's still going to get another opportunity to try it again, maybe even on the very next possession. And I don't think that was the case in previous seasons. It felt like the Cavs were trying to hide Evan Mobley's weaknesses. And really, it felt like they were shielding him from having too much responsibility before he was ready for it on offense. Kenny Atkinson basically said, we're tossing you into the deep end. Let's find out if Mobley can swim. And up to this point, it turns out that he can because he's averaging career highs in points, effective field goal percentage, free throw percentage, and free throw attempts. He's shooting 61% on all 2-pointers. That's a career high, as well as 44% of his mid-range attempts. And so we talked about the 3-point shooting and the free throw shooting and all that, but to tie it all back together, it's the newfound freedom that Mobley has within this offense, combined with the individual improvements that we've seen from him, that has led to this perfect storm that we've been seeing, where basically any way you cut it, Mobley's having the best season of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the increases from last year that I actually like, which doesn't sound uh intuitive at all, is that his turnovers are up from 1.8 to 2.1. I
Mm,
actually like that
yeah,
because it's also, it's coming with the usage. His usage is up from 20.6 to 23.6, and as we've been talking, he's a way bigger focal point of the offense. They're running way more stuff through him, and he's getting that opportunity to make some mistakes, but also like it's not that many more mistakes. Like it's only a
yeah.
tick up, and when I look at kind of where he stands with the rest of, the centers in the NBA, again, the way that, the NBA looks at him positionally, like he's top 10 in a lot of the facilitating metrics that you would look at, like passes per game and potential assists per game. He's actually tied for fourth in secondary assists per game,
Mm.
among centers in the NBA. And it's the guys that you expect to be ball dominant at that position that are ahead of him. It's the Jokic's, the Randalls, and the Shenguns, and these dudes that are like, oh yeah, of course they're the ones that are, driving the ball or doing more facilitating from the center position, because literally the entire offense is built around this player on this team, with the exception of Randall, who the offense is
He
supposed to
thinks
be
the
built
offense is
around
built
Ant,
around.
but he's yeah,
Yeah.
he would tell you otherwise. He's still in like drives per game, which we were talking about earlier. He's still ahead of guys like Embiid, like Jokic, like Anthony Davis, Bam, Wemby, like these basically the star of their team. Yeah, he's ahead of a lot of these dudes, as you mentioned earlier, the third option on offense. It's almost like we love it because we love them and we want the team to be good, but he's almost suffering in numbers and therefore in the reputation around the
Mhm.
league by just like casual NBA and basketball fans, from the fact that he plays with other good players on a good team. Like it hurts him in that way. Uh, LaMelo Ball is getting a lot of talk here with the that All Star, stuff. But like, if Evan Mobley was the number one option on a bottom feeder team, yeah, sure, he would probably put up lots of big numbers and make a bunch of mistakes, and people might be like, "Oh my gosh, look, he's such a beast." But he's doing all of this growing. He's doing all of this, you know, shouldering so much impact that he never has before as a young guy on the best team in basketball. This isn't easy to do. And when you look at some of the improvements that he's made in just his regular everyday counting stats without playing more minutes from last year, this is literally just built off of him getting better, his efficiency getting better. It's not like a guy like CJ McCollum always comes to mind. The year that he won like the most improved player
Mhm.
award. It wasn't because he was actually like doing anything particularly different than he had the year before. He was just doing it in 35 minutes a night instead of 12, right? Like, so the counting stats exploded and all of that improvement looked like he just got way better, but really he just got more opportunity.
Mm.
Evan Mobley is making the most out of opportunity that he's getting, that is to play completely different than what he's been able to play before. As you said, not camping out in the corners. He's more of that hub, in ways that I don't think any of us probably would have expected prior to Kenny Atkinson coming in and like saying that this is how I'm going to unlock this. Um, Yet he's doing that while still also improving the things we wanted him to improve, like 3-point shooting.
Yeah, I mean, he's polishing every aspect of his game. And as you were kind of hitting on, like, just the fact that he has been so willing to accept that he is, like, right now, the third option on offense, he very easily could have become like a disgruntled star throughout his career, especially, the first 3 seasons where he's not really being used in the ways that you would expect. But everyone, not just Mobley, even Darius, Donovan, Jarrett, like, this team is completely bought into the core four and they understand, it's not always going to be Evan Mobley's night. It's not always going to be Donovan Mitchell's night. They're playing with such synergy, and that's really rare. You don't see a core four like this in the NBA very often, where everyone just kind of buys into their role and understands that like it really is about the team and just trying to maximize winning. And we've seen Mobley expand his role. That's what's been the best part about this season is that we've said it a couple of times, but he's not just standing in the corner as a 3-point shooter. He's not even just being like a pick and roll threat. I think one of the limitations that we saw with how Mobley was being used in the past is that they kind of treated him like a traditional big man when that's really not what makes him special. He's special because he is so athletic and his dexterity for his size, his versatility on offense, like that's what you want to get the most out of. And so I think you can really see that when you watch the tape on his drives to the basket. We've seen an increase in his physicality. He's no longer shying away from contact or trying to just dance around everyone. He's actually lowering his shoulder and leveraging against his opponent now to get all the way to the rim. Whereas in the past, it was really easy for guys to kind of wall him off and knock him off balance. And so that's the other thing. The added strength has helped him big time, obviously, because, he can power through guys. But one thing that goes hand in hand with that is the balance. He's not getting knocked around anymore. He's not losing his balance, and so because he's strong enough to maintain that, it kind of unlocks the craftier aspects of his game where you can look at the footwork, the jab step, exploding off that first step, and not running into a wall, but instead getting it all the way around his defender. It unlocks the Euro step, the spin move where he can use his opponent's momentum against them. All the different creative ways that he's always been capable of finishing at the rim. We're seeing it more now because even if he takes a little bit of a bump, it's not stopping him anymore. So honestly, aside from the 3-point shooting, which is always going to generate the most noise and excitement, it's the fact that he just looks so comfortable taking anyone off the dribble, whether it's, an opposing big man, a guard. Like as soon as he gets a mismatch, he's just putting them into the blender. And to me, when you combine all that, taking people off the dribble, bulldozing his way to the rim, abusing every single mismatch, that to me is what has made this a legit leap, not only to the All-Star game, but to me, I think we should be talking, is he third team all NBA at this point, let alone is he going to be an all-star? It's not even a debate that he's an all-star to me. I think he should be an all NBA consideration when you factor in both ends of the floor, but that's another topic for another day, maybe.
I mean, the one thing I've tried to I tried to make a point on this podcast before is, according to Google, and I trust Google with everything that there is to know about the world, obviously. But according to Google, no player has ever won Defensive Player of the Year and Most Improved Player in the same year. And it's reflected in the odds that Mobley doesn't have a great betting chance at either of those awards. But I can't think of anyone who would be more deserving of consideration for both of those awards in the same season kind of just going back, like because of the way that he has continued to anchor this defense, he has been an absolute beast. He's getting tested at the rim, and he's still holding opponents to, you know, almost the same percentage as a guy like Wemby or Jaren Jackson Jr., while having to do it far more frequently than they do because guys just don't try anymore. You know, um, I think that is huge, and at the same time, it is his improvement that has literally turned this team that was a good team to the best team in the NBA through, where are we, 35 games at this point if my
Mhm.
math is mathing. It's almost like the MVP conversation in most improved terms. If you consider an MVP candidate the best player on the best team, in their impact in that way, if you look at that at all through a most improved lens, I don't know how you come up with another name than Evan Mobley in the way that he's just elevated this whole team from, like we mentioned, just becoming a hub, the transition stuff, the grab and go, the shooting, all of the growth that he's had on the offensive end while still backing it up on the defensive end too and still, getting better on that side. It's kind of been the perfect so far of
Mm.
what we could have hoped for coming in with a new coaching staff and really it being put on him because we don't have to relitigate the summer that the Cavs had, but it was kind of a shock that they made zero roster changes. The one big thing that they did for this team was the coaching staff. And so it solidified that this team's potential was going to be on internal growth.
Yeah.
And the player that had the opportunity to do that and had the ceiling, that was untapped and would have to make the most leap for that to happen at all was Evan Mobley. And he's delivered and then some. So I ask you, as kind of our final, wish list to, I guess Santa Claus can't really help us because he's done and gone, but to somebody, whoever can deliver you this gift, like what's that next thing? If you can get greedy right now, what's that next thing that you would like to see from Evan Mobley in to continue, furthering his development?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll give two answers. I'll give kind of like a cheating cop out answer, and then I'll get a little more specific. The next thing that I want to see is just literally everything that we've already seen just continue to trend upwards, right? Like, can he continue to take just a little bit more, add a little bit more to that 3 point volume without sacrificing the efficiency? Can he get to four, maybe even five attempts per game while still shooting close to 40%? And one thing that I also want to mention on that too is the good thing about that is, yes, the volume's not too high, but right now, I don't really see him passing up open looks.
Yeah.
Like anytime he's open, he just takes it. So that's something important to note when we talk about we want the volume to be a little higher. He's taking all the ones that are there for him. So that's good to
Yeah.
see. But yeah, as far as like what do I want to see next for him? I want to see him continue to put more pressure on the rim, taking people off the dribble. I want to see him continue to be more of an offensive threat. And really the defense, it just kind of gets overlooked. We went this whole time barely even talking about the fact that he's like legitimately at worst the third best defender on the planet. I think you could argue he's the best defender. We won't get in, is it Wemby, is it whoever, but he's clearly the top three. And that just goes overlooked. Even by myself, I don't even
Yeah.
spend too much time looking at the defensive metrics anymore because I'm like, yeah, he's incredible. If you just watch the game and you can see him completely shutting things off. If he's within like 3 feet or even like 6 feet of someone, they just don't want to shoot. It's just like he just suppresses everything. So he's an incredible defender. He gets better on offense, as we've seen. He becomes one of the best two-way players in the game. And to give you a more specific answer on something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, I'll give you two things actually. one, the free throw shooting has been improving. The attempts per game has been improving. He's at a career high rate, but I'd still like to see him get to the line a little bit more often, right? Continue to be more physical. Those are just easy points. If you're a 7-footer who moves the way he moves, like I'm not saying he needs to turn into a grifter or anything, but if you get to the free throw line a little more, that'll make me happy. And the one thing that I'm keeping an eye on that has actually surprised me this year because it feels like it should be higher than it is. It's his assist numbers. They're actually lower than last season, which surprised me a little
Yeah.
bit. They're not too much lower by any means. You mentioned like the potential assist and the secondary assist, which is a really good stat to pull because it feels like he makes such good decisions with the ball, especially on the short roll, just his processing speed, seeing the floor really before he even catches the ball, he knows where he's going with it a lot of times. So I think that's one area of the game where right now he's averaging about 3 assists. I really think at his peak, he could be like a 5 assists per night. And that might even be selling him low. I think he could average 5 assists at his peak, maybe even more than that, because he's such a high level processor of the game and he makes such quick decisions. That's one thing that I'm going to keep watching for because the more that he's able to, shoot 3 pointers and score the ball himself is all good and great. But if you can also just give him the ball on the elbow and it's like, hey, you can't double team him because he's going to make the right pass. He's one of the best playmaking bigs in the NBA. That takes him to an entirely new level where maybe he's not the third option on offense anymore. Maybe he's an offensive hub at that point. So that's maybe something that could take a few more years. It's important to keep in mind. Dude's 23. It's pretty crazy that, it feels like because because the Cavs kind of accelerated their timeline trading for Donovan Mitchell, we almost forget that Evan Mobley is still basically an NBA baby. He's only 23 years old. He's like
Yeah.
4 years away from reaching his, where most players would consider their peak. So it might take a little while, but I could see Mobley easily being a guy who averages upwards of 20 points, 5 assists, the 2 blocks per game, whatever, 10 rebounds. Like there's so much more room for potential here. And the encouraging thing is that we're really seeing him start to materialize a lot of that potential and give us enough indication of, the last few years. I'm sure you and me have seen the potential, and a lot of people did, but a lot of people were waiting for it to start to materialize, and we've seen that now. And so there's some proof of concept here that no, he actually is kind of a unicorn and he's trending the right way. So it's been a fantastic year to be an Evan Mobley believer. Evan Mobley Island is just, it's expanding. It's becoming a whole continent. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I'm with you. A couple of things on some of the points that you made. I think the 3 point, the lack of hesitancy in the 3 point shooting, I think that's even been evolving as the season has gone. Like I think you see it, that confidence rising as he goes.
Mm,
Earlier in the season, I think, and I think I heard you say it on the Junkyard pod at some point in time too. So I know you noticed it. There were still moments where you're like, I'd still like to see him shoot that one. Like he
mm,
still was a little bit hesitant or would pump and go when there really wasn't the need for a pump. Like
yeah,
at that moment, just go ahead and shoot that. I'm not seeing that anymore. That's just gone from
not
his
at
game.
all. Yeah.
He's just catching it in rhythm and he's shooting it. And guess what?
Holding the follow through and everything, real
Yeah,
confident every time, even on the misses. It like you can tell he'll take a 3 pointer, hold the follow through, and like almost back up like he's Stephen Curry. Like he thinks it's going in, and it doesn't
yeah.
always go in. But the fact that he thinks it's going in, that's a good thing to see.
That's huge. Absolutely huge. It is surprising that he doesn't get to the line more with the way that he is driving more. Still only 4 attempts a game is seemingly low. But that's kind of what it is for the rest of the team as well. Like nobody really lives at the line.
Yeah,
Um, and I think part of that, so I did a video about this earlier in the season too. I think that also goes into your assist point too. Like I think just the way that this team is playing and moving the ball, it hurts them on some of those metrics. Like they are driving to open up shots for other people. A lot of their offense is really predicated on the drive and kick out or the drive and like dump down to, a guy like Jarrett Allen to finish, where they're not driving to score necessarily. They're not driving and looking to create that contact. They're driving looking to facilitate to somebody else, and they're also moving the ball so quick that nobody's really, aside from Darius a couple of times having some big assist games, like nobody really gets a lot of assist volume either because they just keep the ball moving until they get that great shot. And it may be he probably made the right pass to the guy that was open, but then he kicked it to the guy that was more open, and he kicked it to the
Yeah.
guy that was more open. And that thing, there was nobody within 12 yards of him, and it's going down. It's been so much fun to watch this team, and I think Evan Mobley has really just kind of unlocked everything. Is there anything else you want to do? Any more, I think the kids call it flowers, that you want to throw at Evan Mobley before we wrap up this just celebration of the Evan Mobley, the leap of our baby deer into a full blown buck that's not uncoordinated at all and has nothing to do with that team in Milwaukee.
If I can try and think of one more area to give him flowers, and it's also an area that I like to see him keep improving, but it's the mid range too. I mean, he's shooting 44% from the mid range. Listen, we're in the modern NBA. There's not that much emphasis placed on that part of the game, but really, when you break it down, man, he's shooting the three ball, he's getting to the rim. And when he's in a rhythm, like in that Dallas game where he had the 34 points, the thing that was impressive about that is not only did he hit, I think, 2 threes, he was getting to the rim like crazy. But once he started to gain that confidence and was in a rhythm, he was hitting like shimmy, fadeaway, mid range
Yeah.
jumpers. Like he's falling away and just, we've seen him attempt those in the past. But as you mentioned, he kind of had the baby deer. He looked a little scared. He looked a little, every time he took one of those fall away mid range jumpers, it was like painful. It was like, did he really want to take that? Did he just kind of resort to that? This year, it's like in rhythm. He's confident. He's letting it fly and he thinks it's going in. And so that's been awesome to see. Again, I already mentioned, but I'll just give flowers to everyone. The fact that this whole team, we keep talking about the ball movement, the synergy, the team chemistry, the fact that they've all bought into, hey, we're not going to, like Darius Garland, I'm not going to average 10 assists per game because everyone's touching the ball and we're just finding the most open shot. Donovan Mitchell, there's going to be nights where I only, score 18 points and we win by 30, and that's fine by me. And so everyone across the board accepting their roles, and also just I think Kenny Atkinson has done a great job of pushing the buttons at the right time. Like that goes across the board to different players. Like there's been games where Donovan Mitchell takes like 2 shots. I think that most recent game, why am I blank? Who did they play most recently? Charlotte, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this will come out on Thursday, so technically it'll be the Thunder game. But the Charlotte game, I think Donovan Mitchell had 2 points in the first half, and then he comes out in the third quarter and the fourth quarter and scores like 17 because he just realized this is my moment of the game to shine. Feels like everyone on the team has had their own moments and they've recognized when it's time to step up and they've knocked it out the park.
Yeah, I think somebody put it on Twitter, and I can't remember who did it, so I can't give them credit. But just noting that the core four all led the team in scoring
Yeah.
on that West road trip. They each like took their turn.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's had their moments to dominate. Everybody's had their moments to shine. None more so in the Cavs space though than Tony Pesta. Thank you for doing this. This was a blast. Thanks for nerding out. Um,
It's a great
you
time.
and everybody else. Hopefully we get to do this again.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I really appreciate coming on here. This was a great conversation and I'm looking forward to doing it again.